working with the Selenium WebDriver. We learned a lot in the previous section about finding locators with the help of ID, name, DOM, XPath, CSS selector, text and link text. In this section, we will look at working with the Selenium WebDriver. We will learn about Selenium WebDriver layered architecture and how different programs bind to the browser driver of a Selenium WebDriver API. Also, we will learn the different browsers setting up with the WebDriver. In this section, we are going to take a look at understanding the WebDriver architecture, setting up Eclipse IDE and Java project with Selenium WebDriver and TestNG, working with the Firefox driver, working with the Chrome driver, working with the Internet Explorer driver. Let's start with the first video of this section, understanding the WebDriver architecture. The goal of this video is to understand the WebDriver architecture and WebDriver API. In this video, we are going to take a look at WebDriver architecture, Selenium WebDriver API. Let's start with understanding the WebDriver architecture. The system is made up of 4 different layers. The WebDriver API. The WebDriver API is the part of the system that you interact with all the time. The API code is made up of the WebDriver and the web element objects, which wrap the WebDriver commands. These commands are then translated to SPI, which is stateless, means that there is no record of previous interactions and each interaction request has to be handled based entirely on information that comes with it. The WebDriver SPI. When the code enters the SPI, stateless programming interface, it is then called to a mechanism that breaks down what element is using unique ID and then calls a command that is relevant. All of the API calls will happen in a top-down approach. From there, we call the JSON wire protocol. We still use HTTP as the main transport mechanism. Developers created the JSON wired protocol to communicate with browsers, a simple client-server transport architecture. The JSON wire protocol. This protocol is able to transport all necessary elements to the code that controls it. It uses a REST-like API as the way to communicate. The Selenium server. The Selenium server or browser, depending on what is processing, uses the JSON wire protocol commands to break down the JSON object and then does what it needs to. This part of the code is dependent on which browser it is running on. Let's look at Selenium WebDriver API. The image shows how many languages the Selenium WebDriver currently supports. In simple words, these are the languages in which we can build the framework, which in turn will interact with Selenium WebDriver and work on various browsers and other devices. So, we have a common API that we use for Selenium that has a common set of commands, and we have various bindings for the different languages. The Selenium WebDriver contains a set of common libraries that allows sending commands to respective drivers. As seen in the image on the right hand side, we have the drivers. We have various internet browser specific drivers such as IE driver, Firefox, Chrome and others such as HTML unit, which is an interesting one. It works in a headless mode, which makes test execution faster. However, the basic idea here is that each one of these drivers knows how to drive the browser that it corresponds to. So, the Chrome driver knows how to handle the low-level details of the Chrome browser and drives it to do things, such as clicking on a button, going to pages, getting data from the browser itself. The same thing goes for Firefox, IE and so on. In this video, we have understood about WebDriver architecture and WebDriver API.